My name is Rick Featherbridge, and I'm here to talk tennis. And today we're going to talk about the women's side, or the women's draw at the French Open. And probably the biggest story so far in terms of the women at the French Open is Naomi Osaka. And in case you haven't kept up with this, I'll give you a little background. Naomi Osaka is the second ranked player in the world. And shortly before the French Open started, she made an announcement that she was not going to give press conferences after her matches. And the WTA has a policy that players are required to do after match press interviews. And of course, I think this makes sense, right? It's good for tennis. And generally, it's good for the player too, right? So from a tennis perspective, you want to build the sport. You want to get as much press publicity as possible. You want to have as much color background on the players. It makes tennis more interesting for fans who follow them. And so you can sort of understand the reasoning behind the rule. And in general, most players, I think, are happy and willing to give after-match interviews. Obviously, if you're not a well-known player, it's an opportunity to get some press. All of the players want to get endorsements. That's a big part of tennis. I mean, for a lot of the star players, they make as much money on endorsements or more than they do from playing in the matches. What happened was that Naomi Osaka played her first round match. She won her first round match. After the match was over, she did an on-court interview with Fabrice Santoro. And then, like she said, she did not do the after-match press conference. And so the response of the WTA was to fine her. And then the next day, after the fine had been levied, Naomi Osaka announced that she was withdrawing from the French Open. So this has created a really big controversy. And one thing in particular was that Naomi justified not participating in the after-match conference because she's been having mental health issues, which I think, sort of complicates the response from the WTA, right? If someone is just doing it because they don't feel like it, then obviously they should be fined. It's bad for the sport. It's an easy decision, right? On the other hand, if someone has a really serious mental health issue, and there's a, certified psychologist or psychiatrist that's treating them and has made some sort of diagnosis, then I think it's a more sympathetic, right? It's more justified avoiding the press conference. So here's the issue for the WTA, right? What do you do when Naomi Osaka withdraws from the French? That's bad. That's bad for tennis. Look, tennis fans want to see the best players in the world competing at the highest level. Naomi Osaka's won 4 Grand Slams. She's ranked 2 in the world. If Ash Barty or, Iga Swiatek go on to win the French, we want them to have to beat Naomi Osaka, and that's part of the drama and part of what makes tennis interesting. So, I think everyone's disappointed when she withdraws from the French. Having said that, there's a lot of sort of issues that make this more complicated. The first issue is that Naomi Osaka is not a very good clay court player, right? So she's won 4 Grand Slams, but none of them on clay. I don't think she's ever been past the 3rd round at the French. And the reason that's important is that it's not a big deal for her to withdraw from the French, right? She's going to have her success. She's going to win her money. She's going to win her titles. not on clay, but on hard court, which is where she's won her titles, right? At the Australian Open and at the US Open. So, you know, it may not be a difficult decision for her, right? She may say, I was only going to win another match or two. I don't care. And then the issue for the WTA is, you know, how do you address this issue? Do you want to create a special exception for people that have mental health issues and allow them to avoid the general rule that every player is required to do after match press conferences? And then if you do that, you know, what are the requirements, right? I mean, so do you have, you know, like a certified psychologist or psychiatrist that has to, you know, do sort of an in-depth interview with the player and make sure that they have, you know, a diagnosable mental illness and that it's serious enough that it's justified in them not doing the after-match press conference? You can see this gets pretty complicated. So it'll be interesting to see, right? And it'll be interesting to see now, you know, Roland Garros is the end of the clay court season. So, you know, the next would be grass. And that also isn't a great surface for Naomi Osaka. Does she continue this policy, right, of not giving press conferences after matches? Was this a one-time thing? And then how does the WTA respond to this, right? Obviously, you want the number 2 player in the world playing in matches. It's good for women's tennis. At the same time, it seems like it's not fair to make a special exception for one player. You know, this will be a big issue for women's tennis. So we'll have to sort of see. I think, you know, over the next few months, this will sort of play out and then, you know, sort of be finalized as to whether or not the WTA or even the ATP in the future make some sort of special exceptions for documented cases with people that have mental health issues. I just want to say as a fan that I enjoy watching Naomi Osaka play. She is an extremely talented player. She also is a sort of an interesting personality. And I enjoy seeing her in the press conferences. It's the one time that you sort of get to a sense of what a player's personality is like. So for me, it's a disappointment that she's not playing at the French. At the same time, I totally understand the WTA finding her and sticking to that policy. Like, look, you got to be the big star you are now, and you got all the endorsements, and you've got millions and millions of dollars of endorsements because of all the publicity you received from being a player. And it's not fair to tennis for you to simply duck out of press conferences because you don't like doing them. So I understand the dilemma for the WTA. I think they don't want to have to make a special exception for one player. But as a fan, I want to see Naomi Osaka play. And I want to see her play even if she doesn't do press conferences. Although I think she should do press conferences. And I think she should acknowledge that, you know, she wouldn't be in the situation that she's in today in terms of having millions of dollars of endorsements and being sort of a worldwide known celebrity without all the press and publicity she's gotten from her tennis playing. All right, enough about Naomi Osaka. Let's move on to the women's draw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the women's draw into categories. And the first category I'm going to talk about is favorites, right? And these are the three women that I think, in my mind, are the most likely to win the French. So the number one favorite, in my opinion, is Ash Barty. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The first one is that she's the number one ranked woman in women's tennis, that over the last 2 years, she has been a very consistent player. She's played well on all surfaces, and she's the number one player by a pretty big margin, right? Almost 3,000 ranking points between her and Naomi Osaka, right? And I think it shows that, even though Naomi Osaka is a really talented number two, she doesn't play as well on clay and grass as she does on hard courts. And one of the distinguishing things about Ash Barty is her game plays really well on all surfaces. And she's a threat to win on all surfaces. All right. The other thing is that Ash Barty has played really well this clay court season, right? And so the first big clay court tournament for the women was in Stuttgart, and she won that. And she beat Sabalenka, who's also an extremely talented clay court player, in the final of Stuttgart. She was a finalist at the Madrid clay court tournament. And in that final, she lost to Sabalenka. So she's been extremely consistent, playing at a really high level on clay. And, she's been also consistent the whole year. The last thing that I think is important to point out about Ash Barty is that the last time she played the French, now she didn't play last year in 2020 because of the pandemic, but she did play in 2019, and she won the French then. So for all of those reasons, in my opinion, she's the favorite. Now my second favorite at the French, and it's a very close second, is Iga Swiatek. And of course she won the French last year in 2020. It was a very surprising win for most people. She was 18 years old. She was not seeded. She was a relatively unknown player. And it was, one of those sort of Cinderella stories where, a player that was playing junior events, months ago, shows up at the French and wins Roland Garros. Very impressive accomplishment on her part. And it clearly wasn't one of those one-time things, right? And every once in a while we see that where somebody just plays crazy good at one tournament, but then, never is able to sort of repeat that. With Swiatek, we see that she has now ranked 9 in the world, and that since she won the French, she's played well, and she's been consistently one of the top women players on the tour. And then in addition to that, she's also had a very strong clay court season leading up to the French. So she won in Rome, right? The last big clay court tournament before Roland Garros. And she had an impressive run, beating some really good players on her way to that Rome championship. She also played well at Madrid. She lost to Barty. And of course, Barty being the number one player in the world, that's not a bad loss. So for all of those reasons, I would put Iga Swiatek as my second, but a very close second favorite to win Roland Garros. The third favorite is going to be Sabalenka. And she's also had a really strong clay court season. She went to the finals of Stuttgart She lost in the final to Ash Barty, close match. And then the next big tournament was Madrid, and she won Madrid, and she beat Ash Barty in that final, which is really impressive. So she's played really well during the clay court season, and she's now the 4th ranked player in the world. So it's not just the clay court season where she's played well. She's also one of those players that has been consistent on all surfaces and has been really steady throughout the last year. Now, one thing about Sabalenka is that she hasn't really performed well in the Grand Slam events. And we've seen this with some players that are really talented and have really good results in all the other tournaments, but something about, the spotlight and the intensity that goes into a Grand Slam event, also the pressure of someone that hasn't yet won a Grand Slam event. So it'll be interesting to see if that affects her, right? That, if she plays the way she has been playing through the early part of the clay court season, she should easily get to the quarters or the semis of the French. And if she doesn't, I think, you can make the argument that it's a sign that the pressure of the Grand Slam event has gotten to her, and that she is not able to play her best tennis at a Grand Slam event like Roland Garros. But look, we've seen this with a lot of different players, right? Whether you want to talk about Andy Murray, who struggled in some Grand Slam events before he finally won one, or Ivan Lendl, you can go down. There's a list of great players. And so I think it's just a matter of time, like it was for Ivan Lendl and it was for Andy Murray, that Sabalenka will eventually win a Grand Slam event, and she just has the talent where she'll figure it out. Whatever feelings of pressure or whatever else it is at the Grand Slam events that are keeping her from playing her best tennis, I think she'll be able to figure that out.